The call came before dawn. Emergency repair at the Ashford estate. Raymond Walsh had been fixing pipes for 15 years, but his hands still hesitated on the steering wheel when the GPS led him through iron gates that belonged in a different world. The mansion rose from morning fog like something out of a dream. Marble steps, windows that reflected clouds. Silence so complete it pressed against his chest. Katherine Ashford answered the door herself. No staff, no smile. Just exhaustion carved into the face of a woman Forbes had called unstoppable. She led him through hallways where his work boots seemed too loud, past rooms where sunlight fell on furniture nobody touched. Upstairs, machines hummed a rhythm he recognized from somewhere he didn't want to remember. He fixed the leak in 20 minutes, but before he left, he saw it through the kitchen window. A wooden swing, motionless in the garden, paint fading, chains starting to rust. 3 days later, a single moment would tear Raymond's world apart and stitch someone else's back together. What he did shouldn't have been possible. It shouldn't have worked. But sometimes the things that save us come from the places we least expect. And the cost? That's what makes this story impossible to forget. Raymond's alarm went off at 5:30 every morning, not because he wanted to wake up that early, but because Noah needed breakfast before his medication, and the medication needed to be taken exactly 2 hours before school started. The routine had become muscle memory over the past 3 years. Wake up, shower, check Noah's oxygen levels on the monitor beside his bed. Make pancakes. Not the fancy kind. Just the mix from the box that Noah liked, because it had chocolate chips already in it. That morning, the kitchen smelled like burnt edges and syrup. Raymond had been distracted, staring at the envelope on the counter. Medical bills. Always medical bills. He flipped the pancake too late, and the bottom came out darker than it should have. Noah wouldn't mind. The kid never complained about anything, which sometimes worried Raymond more than if he had thrown tantrums like other 8-year-olds. Noah shuffled into the kitchen in his dinosaur pajamas, dragging his favorite blanket. His face was pale, the kind of pale that came from spending too much time indoors, away from playgrounds and soccer fields. But his eyes were bright when he saw his father at the stove. Raymond set the plate down and ruffled his son's hair, feeling the familiar ache in his chest that had nothing to do with exhaustion, and everything to do with how fragile this moment felt. Every morning felt borrowed. Every smile felt like something he might lose. They ate in comfortable silence. Noah picked at his pancakes, eating around the burnt parts without saying anything. The oxygen concentrator hummed in the corner, a sound that had become part of their home's heartbeat. Outside, the sky was turning from black to deep blue, and Raymond watched his son's small hands struggle with the fork. There had been a time when Noah could run, when he could climb trees and ride his bike without stopping every few minutes to catch his breath. That time felt like another life now. Raymond's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen. Emergency call. The Ashford estate. He knew the name. Everyone in the city knew the name. Katherine Ashford, tech billionaire, the woman who had built her company from nothing and turned it into something that made headlines every other week. He had never imagined he would be the one fixing her pipes. He looked at Noah, who was tracing patterns in the syrup on his plate. The job paid well. Emergency calls always did. And they needed the money. They always needed the money. Raymond stood up and kissed the top of Noah's head. His son smelled like sleep and strawberry shampoo. Gotta go to work early today, buddy. Mrs. Chen will come get you ready for school, okay? Noah nodded, still focused on his plate. Raymond grabbed his toolkit from the closet, the same battered red toolbox his father had given him 20 years ago. The handle was wrapped in duct tape, and one of the latches didn't quite close right, but it had everything he needed. He paused at the door, looking back at Noah one more time. The morning light was starting to come through the window, catching the dust in the air and turning everything soft and golden. He tried to memorize the moment. He always tried to memorize the moments. The drive to the Ashford estate took 40 minutes. Raymond watched the neighborhood change through his windshield. The buildings got taller, the trees got bigger, the gates got higher. By the time his jeeps announced he had arrived, he was in a part of the city that felt like a different country. The iron gates were taller than his truck. Beyond them, a driveway curved through manicured lawns that looked like they had never seen a weed in their life. A security guard waved him through after checking his ID 3 times. Raymond drove slowly, feeling out of place in a way that made his shoulders tense. The mansion appeared through the morning fog like something from a movie. 3 stories of stone and glass, columns that served no purpose except to look expensive, windows so clean they reflected the sky perfectly. He parked his truck next to a fountain that probably cost more than his annual income and grabbed his toolkit. The front door opened before he could knock. Katherine Ashford stood there, and Raymond recognized her immediately from the magazine covers he had seen in grocery store checkout lines. But the woman in those photos had been smiling, confident, untouchable. This woman looked like she had aged 10 years in the span of a few months. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail. No makeup. Dark circles under her eyes that no amount of money could hide. She was wearing jeans and a sweater that looked soft and expensive, but her feet were bare, and there was something about that detail that made her seem almost human. "Mr. Walsh?" Her voice was quieter than he expected. Professional, but tired. "Yes, ma'am. You called about a pipe issue?" She nodded and stepped aside to let him in. The hallway swallowed him whole, marble floors that reflected his worn work boots, a chandelier overhead that looked like it weighed more than his truck, paintings on the walls that might have been famous. Raymond kept his eyes on Catherine's back as she led him deeper into the house, past rooms with furniture that looked like it had never been sat on, past windows that looked out on gardens that seemed to go on forever. They went upstairs. The hallway was quieter here, carpeted in something thick and soft that muffled their footsteps. Katherine stopped in front of a bathroom and gestured inside. Raymond could hear water dripping somewhere behind the walls, a steady rhythm that spoke of a leak that had been going on for a while. He set his toolkit down and got to work, kneeling on the expensive tile and opening the access panel beneath the sink. The work was straightforward. A loose connection, a worn washer, things he could fix in his sleep. But while he worked, he became aware of sounds from the room next door. Medical equipment, the soft beep of monitors, the mechanical wheeze of something helping someone breathe. He had heard those sounds before, in hospital rooms that smelled like disinfectant and fear. His hands stilled on the wrench for a moment before he forced himself to keep working. Katherine stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching him, but not really seeing him. She looked like she was somewhere else entirely. Raymond worked in silence, tightening connections and replacing the worn parts. When he tested the water, it ran clear and smooth. No more dripping. He packed up his tools and stood, wiping his hands on his work pants. "All fixed," he said. "The washer was worn through. Should be fine now." "Thank you." She pulled out her phone to pay him, but her hands were shaking slightly. It took her 3 tries to open the payment app. Raymond pretended not to notice. As he was leaving, he passed a window that looked out over the back garden. That's when he saw it. A wooden swing set, the kind that looked custom-built, expensive. But it was perfectly still. No child playing on it. The paint was starting to fade on the seats. The chains had spots of rust beginning to form. And underneath the swings, the grass had grown tall, undisturbed. It was the saddest thing Raymond had seen in a long time. And he had seen plenty of sad things, it seems. He thought about Noah that morning, sitting at their small kitchen table, picking at burnt pancakes. He thought about the oxygen concentrator humming in the corner. He thought about how his son couldn't run anymore, couldn't play on swings, couldn't do all the things that swing set in the garden was built for. And he thought about the medical equipment humming upstairs in this mansion, and realized that money couldn't fix everything. Money couldn't buy the one thing Katherine Ashford needed most. Raymond left without saying anything else. Katherine paid him through the app and closed the door softly behind him. He sat in his truck for a moment before starting the engine, staring at that empty swing set through the rearview mirror. Then he drove home to pick up Noah and take him to school, holding his son's hand a little tighter than usual when they crossed the parking lot. 3 days passed. 3 ordinary days of burnt pancakes and medication schedules and trying not to think about medical bills. Raymond took Noah to school every morning and picked him up every afternoon. They did homework at the kitchen table. They watched cartoons before bed. They existed in the small, careful bubble they had built around themselves, where everything was manageable as long as nothing changed. On the 3rd day, Raymond was finishing a job at an apartment complex when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was just bad timing. "Mr. Walsh," a woman's voice, not Katherine, someone official. "This is City General Hospital. We have your son here. There's been an accident." The world tilted. Raymond's vision tunneled. He heard himself asking questions, but the answers didn't make sense. Bike accident. Intersection near the school. A truck ran a red light. Noah had been crossing the street. The words came at him like bullets, each one hitting somewhere vital. He was moving before he realized it, running to his truck, his hands shaking so badly he could barely get the key in the ignition. The drive to the hospital took 12 minutes. It felt like hours. It felt like seconds. Raymond couldn't remember any of it later, just the sound of his own breathing, the feeling of his heart trying to break through his ribs, the way his hands gripped the steering wheel hard enough to hurt. He parked illegally and ran through the emergency room doors, and a nurse was already waiting for him, already leading him down hallways that smelled like antiseptic and desperation. They had Noah in a room behind glass, tubes and wires everywhere, machines breathing for him, monitors showing numbers that Raymond didn't understand but knew were bad. A doctor was waiting, a woman with kind eyes and a tired face. She used words like traumatic brain injury and cerebral herniation and irreversible damage. She used the phrase brain death, and Raymond's legs stopped working. He sat down hard in a plastic chair and stared through the glass at his son, at the small body that looked too still, too quiet, too wrong. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Walsh," the doctor said. Her hand was on his shoulder, but he couldn't feel it. He couldn't feel anything. "We did everything we could. Time stopped meaning anything." Raymond sat in that plastic chair and watched his son's chest rise and fall with mechanical precision, knowing it wasn't really Noah breathing, knowing his boy was already gone. The Noah who loved chocolate chip pancakes and dinosaur pajamas and fixing broken things with his dad. That Noah had left sometime between the crosswalk and the truck's front bumper. What remained was just a body kept alive by machines. A shell that looked like his son but wasn't anymore. Hours passed. Maybe days. Raymond couldn't tell. People came and talked to him. Social workers, chaplains, more doctors. They used words like organ donation and giving others a chance and legacy. Raymond heard them but didn't hear them. His world had narrowed to the window in front of him and the small figure behind it. Then a different doctor came. Older, careful in the way she spoke. She sat down next to Raymond and waited until he looked at her before she started talking. "Mr. Walsh, I know this is an impossible time, but I need to ask you something important. Your son is on the organ donor registry. You signed the papers when he was born." Raymond stared at her. He had forgotten about that. A form at the hospital, years ago. A checkbox he had ticked without thinking because it seemed like the right thing to do, because he never imagined he would have to face what it actually meant. Noah's heart is strong, the doctor continued quietly. Despite everything, his heart is perfect. And there's a child who needs it, a child who will die without it. I know this is the hardest decision you'll ever make, but I need to know if you'll honor that registry. If you'll let us try to save someone else's child. Raymond closed his eyes. Behind his eyelids, he saw Noah that morning, 3 days ago, picking at burnt pancakes, tracing patterns in syrup, smiling that small, tired smile. He saw Noah asking about the toolkit, wanting to learn how to fix things, wanting to help, always wanting to help, even when his own body was broken. "Who?" Raymond's voice came out hoarse. "Who's the child?" The doctor hesitated. "I can't give you specific information. Privacy laws. But I can tell you it's a 9-year-old boy with cardiomyopathy. Same rare blood type as your son. He's been on the transplant list for over a year. Without a donor, he has days, maybe less." Raymond opened his eyes and looked through the glass at Noah. His son. His whole world. The person he had built his entire life around protecting. And now the only way to save him was to let him go. To let his heart beat in someone else's chest. To turn his boy into spare parts for a stranger. But even as he thought it, he knew it wasn't true. Noah wasn't spare parts. Noah was a child who had spent his whole short life wanting to fix broken things. A child who had smiled through pain and never complained. A child who deserved to leave something good behind, something that mattered. Raymond stood up. His legs were shaking, but they held him. He walked to the glass and put his hand against it, as close to touching his son as he could get. He stood there for a long time, memorizing the shape of Noah's face, the curve of his small hands, the way his hair fell across his forehead. Then he turned back to the doctor. "Do it," he said. His voice broke on the words, but they came out clear enough. "Take his heart. Let him save someone." The doctor nodded. There were tears in her eyes. "You're giving an incredible gift, Mr. Walsh. I promise you we'll take care of him." They gave Raymond time to say goodbye. He went into the room and sat beside Noah's bed and held his son's hand. It was still warm. The machines made it seem like Noah was just sleeping, like he might wake up any moment and ask for pancakes. But Raymond knew better. He leaned close and whispered all the things he should have said more often. "I love you. I'm proud of you. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. You made me a better person. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. I'm sorry I couldn't fix this." He stayed until they came to prep Noah for surgery. Then he kissed his son's forehead one last time and walked out of the room without looking back, because if he looked back, he would never be able to leave. He would grab Noah and run and damn the consequences, and his son would stay broken forever, instead of becoming something whole for someone else. Raymond found himself in a waiting room that smelled like stale coffee and resignation. Other families sat, scattered around, each locked in their own private grief. He didn't know how long he sat there. Time had stopped making sense. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, too bright and too sterile. His phone buzzed occasionally with messages from people who had heard about the accident, but he couldn't make himself read them. He just sat and stared at his hands. The same hands that had fixed pipes that morning, that had made burnt pancakes 3 days ago, that had held his son's hand for the last time. A nurse brought him forms to sign. Legal documents that turned his son into a donor, that gave permission for the surgeons to take Noah apart and distribute the pieces to strangers who needed them more. Raymond's hand shook as he signed his name over and over. Each signature felt like another goodbye. Each paper was another piece of Noah being filed away into hospital bureaucracy. Across the city, in a different wing of the same hospital, Katherine Ashford sat beside a different bed. Her son Liam had been declining for weeks. The monitors showed a heart struggling to keep rhythm, fighting a battle it was slowly losing. She held his hand and tried not to think about the swing set in their garden, about all the days he should have had and wouldn't get. Liam's eyes were closed, his breathing labored even with the oxygen mask. He was 9 years old and dying, and all her money, all her power, all her connections meant nothing against the simple fact that his heart was giving up. A doctor knocked softly before entering. Katherine looked up, expecting more bad news. She had gotten good at reading the expressions on doctors' faces over the past year. This one looked different, cautiously hopeful. "Mrs. Ashford, we may have found a match." Katherine stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. "What? How? You said the chances were—" "I know, but we have a donor. Same blood type. Perfect match on all the markers we can test. The surgical team is prepping now. If you consent, we can begin the procedure within the hour." She couldn't breathe. For a moment she forgot how. "Yes, God, yes. Do it, save him." The doctor nodded and left. Katherine sank back into her chair and looked at Liam, at her son who might actually have a future now. She thought about the family of the donor, whoever they were. Someone else's child had died so hers could live. Someone else was signing papers in a waiting room, giving away pieces of someone they loved. The gratitude and guilt hit her simultaneously, a wave so strong she had to put her head in her hands to keep from drowning in it. The surgery took 9 hours. Raymond waited in one part of the hospital while Katherine waited in another. Neither knew the other existed. The same surgical team moved between them, carrying Noah's heart from one room to another, performing the intricate dance of taking life from death and giving it back again. Raymond didn't pray. He had stopped believing in God around the time Noah got sick, but he sat in that waiting room and made deals with the universe anyway. Let it work. Let something good come from this. Let Noah's heart keep beating, even if it's in someone else's chest. Let my boy save someone. Katherine did pray. She had started again when Liam got sick, returning to habits from childhood that she thought she had outgrown. She prayed to every version of God she could think of. She promised things she couldn't deliver. She bargained with forces she didn't believe in. She would have sold her soul if it meant her son would live. In the end, she didn't have to. Someone else had already paid the price. Dawn was breaking when the surgeon finally came out. Raymond had been awake for over 24 hours. His eyes felt like sandpaper. His body ached in ways he didn't know were possible. The surgeon looked tired but satisfied, the expression of someone who had just won a battle they weren't sure they could win. "Mr. Walsh, the procedure was successful. Your son's heart is beating in the recipient's chest, strong and steady. You gave that child a future. I know that doesn't make this easier, but I wanted you to know. What you did today will ripple forward in ways you can't imagine." Raymond nodded. He couldn't speak. The surgeon squeezed his shoulder and left. Raymond sat alone in the waiting room as the sun came up, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that Noah would never see again. He thought about his son's heart beating in a stranger's chest, wondered what the child was like, wondered if they knew how much that heart had cost, wondered if they would take care of it the way Noah would have wanted. He went home to an empty apartment. Noah's dinosaur pajamas were still on his bed. His homework was still on the kitchen table, half finished. The oxygen concentrator sat silent in the corner, no longer needed. Raymond walked through rooms that felt too quiet, too still, too wrong. He should clean up, should call people, should make funeral arrangements, should do all the things that came after a child died. But instead, he sat at the kitchen table and stared at the 2 coffee cups still sitting there from 3 days ago, and he didn't move for a very long time. Meanwhile, in the recovery wing, Liam Ashford opened his eyes. His chest ached, but it was a different kind of ache than before. Not the crushing weight of a failing heart, but the sharp, clean pain of healing. Katherine was there immediately, tears streaming down her face, holding his hand like she was afraid he might disappear if she let go. "Mum?" His voice was hoarse from the breathing tube they had just removed. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here. You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay." The doctors came in to check his vitals. Strong heartbeat, good oxygen levels, all signs pointing to a successful transplant. Liam was groggy and confused, but alive. Gloriously, impossibly alive. Katherine watched the monitors that now showed healthy rhythms instead of failing ones, and she felt the weight of the past year begin to lift. Her son would live. He would grow up. He would get to use that swing set in the garden, all because someone she had never met had made an impossible choice. Days passed. Liam grew stronger. Katherine stayed by his bedside, watching every breath, every heartbeat, afraid to believe it was real. The hospital wouldn't tell her anything about the donor. Privacy laws. All she knew was that somewhere a family was grieving while she was celebrating, and that knowledge sat heavy in her chest, a debt she could never repay. Raymond went through the motions of living. He planned a funeral. He cleaned out Noah's room, packing away dinosaur pajamas and homework and all the small pieces of a life that had ended too soon. Mrs. Chen from next door brought him casseroles he didn't eat. His boss told him to take all the time he needed. People said things that were supposed to be comforting, but just made the silence louder when they left. Everyone kept telling him that Noah was a hero, that he had saved a life, that it meant something. Raymond knew they were right, but it didn't make his son any less dead. It didn't make the apartment any less empty. It didn't make the mornings any easier when he woke up and forgot, for just a moment, that he didn't need to make 2 servings of pancakes anymore. A week after the surgery, an envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Just Raymond's name written in careful handwriting. Inside was a letter. Katherine had spent 3 days writing it, throwing away draft after draft, trying to find words adequate for what she needed to say. In the end, she kept it simple. "Dear Mr. Walsh, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't even know if they'll forward it to you. But I had to try. My son is alive because of your son. I will carry that knowledge for the rest of my life. There is no thank you big enough, no words sufficient. Nothing I can say that will make your loss any less devastating or my gratitude any less profound. I am sorry. I am grateful. I am in debt to you in ways I can never repay. Your son gave mine a future. I promise you, I will make sure that gift is honored, that it matters, that it was worth something. I don't know what else to say except that I see you. I see what you lost. I see what you gave. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure my son knows what he owes to a boy he never met. With more gratitude than words can hold, Katherine Ashford." Tucked in with the letter was a check. An obscene amount of money. More than Raymond made in 5 years. Maybe more than he would make in his lifetime. He stared at it for a long time, feeling something hot and angry rise in his chest. She thought she could pay him. Thought money could balance the scales. Thought a check could somehow make them even. He folded the letter and the check back into the envelope, wrote "Return to sender" across the front, put it in the mail the next day. If Katherine wanted to honor Noah's gift, she could do it without trying to buy Raymond's forgiveness. His son hadn't died, so some billionaire could throw money at her guilt. 2 weeks later, the envelope came back. This time with a different letter. I understand. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to insult you. I just didn't know what else to do, how to help, how to make any of this bearable. I realize now that nothing can. I won't contact you again. But if you ever want to meet Liam, to see what your son's gift became, the door is always open. No money, no obligations, just a chance to see that Noah's heart is still beating, still strong, still saving a life every single day. Raymond put that letter in a drawer and tried to forget about it. He went back to work, fixed pipes, came home to an empty apartment, existed in a world where his son was gone and someone else's son was alive because of it. He told himself it was enough, that knowing Noah had saved someone was sufficient, that he didn't need to see the boy who was living on borrowed time gifted by his son's death. But late at night, when the apartment was too quiet and sleep wouldn't come, Raymond thought about it, wondered what the kid was like, wondered if he laughed like Noah had, wondered if his mother held him tight the way Raymond had held his son, wondered if they knew, really knew, what they had been given. 3 months after the surgery, on what would have been Noah's 9th birthday, Raymond got in his truck and drove to the Ashford estate. He didn't call ahead, didn't plan what he would say, just drove through those iron gates and parked next to the fountain and knocked on that massive front door before he could talk himself out of it. Katherine answered. She looked different than she had the day he came to fix the pipes. Younger, somehow. The exhaustion had lifted from her face. She saw him, and her eyes went wide with recognition, with something that might have been fear or hope or both. Mr. Walsh. Is he here? Raymond's voice came out rougher than he intended. Your son. Can I see him? Katherine nodded and stepped back to let him in. She led him through the same hallways, but this time Raymond noticed things he had missed before. Pictures on the walls, a jacket thrown over a chair, a pair of small sneakers by the door, signs of life that hadn't been there 3 months ago. They walked through the kitchen and out into the garden, where the swing set Raymond had seen through the window now had a child on it. Liam was small for 9 years old. Thin, in the way kids who had been sick for a long time stayed thin even after they started to heal. But his face had color. His movements had energy. He was swinging high, laughing at something only he found funny. And when Katherine called his name, he jumped off mid-swing and came running over with the fearlessness of a child who had forgotten what it felt like to be fragile. Liam, this is Mr. Walsh. He came to visit. The boy looked up at Raymond with bright, curious eyes. Hi, do you want to see my treehouse? Mom just had it finished last week. Raymond couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, because standing in front of him was a living, laughing child with Noah's heart beating in his chest. And for just a moment, Raymond could almost pretend, could almost hear his son's laugh in this stranger's voice, could almost feel like Noah was still here, in some way, still running and playing and being the kid he had always wanted to be. I'd like that, Raymond managed. His voice cracked, but Liam didn't seem to notice. The boy grabbed his hand and pulled him toward an elaborate treehouse that definitely hadn't been there 3 months ago. Katherine followed at a distance, giving them space but staying close enough to intervene if needed. Liam chatted the whole way, talking about school and his friends, and how he was finally strong enough to climb the ladder all by himself. Raymond listened and nodded, and tried not to think about how Noah would have loved a treehouse like this, how his son never got strong enough to climb ladders, how unfair it was that this boy got a future while his didn't. But watching Liam scramble up into the treehouse, seeing the pure joy on his face, hearing him call down for Raymond to come see the view, something shifted. It wasn't fair. Would never be fair. But Noah's heart was beating, strong and steady, giving this child the life Raymond's son never got to finish. And maybe that did matter. Maybe it was enough. Not healing, not closure, but enough to keep going. Enough to believe that Noah's life, however short, had meant something beyond the walls of their small apartment. Raymond climbed the ladder, sat in the treehouse with Liam, looking out over the garden. The boy pulled out a small tool kit, the kind sold in toy stores for kids who wanted to build things. "Look what Mom got me," Liam said proudly. "I've been fixing stuff around the house. Well, trying to. I'm not very good yet, but I'm learning." Raymond looked at the small toolkit, at the child holding it, at the earnest expression on Liam's face. And something inside him, something that had been frozen solid since that phone call from the hospital, began to thaw just slightly. "I could teach you," Raymond heard himself say. "If you want. I fix things for a living. Pipes, mostly. But the principles are the same for just about anything." Liam's face lit up. "Really? That would be awesome." They spent the afternoon in that treehouse. Raymond showed Liam how to use a screwdriver properly, how to tighten a loose board, how to fix a squeaky hinge. The boy learned quickly, his small hands careful and precise. And with every lesson, every shared moment, Raymond felt the weight on his chest ease just a fraction. It wasn't about replacing Noah. Nothing could replace Noah. But it was about honoring what his son had given, about making sure that heart kept beating for something worthwhile. When the sun started to set, Raymond climbed down from the treehouse. Liam followed, still chattering about all the things he wanted to learn to fix. Katherine was waiting by the back door, and when Raymond met her eyes, there was an understanding there that didn't need words. She wasn't trying to replace what he had lost. She was offering him a chance to be part of what he had given. A chance to see Noah's legacy grow into something bigger than grief. "Thank you," Katherine said quietly. "For coming. For staying. For—" She gestured helplessly at Liam, who was examining a loose doorknob with his new tool kit. "For all of it." Raymond nodded. He couldn't quite bring himself to say it was okay, because it wasn't. Would never be. But he could see the path forward now, narrow and painful as it was. Could see a way to live with the loss that didn't mean pretending Noah had never existed. His son's heart was still beating, still fixing things in a way, still making the world a little bit better, one small repair at a time. "I could come back," Raymond said. "Next week, maybe? Continue the lessons." Katherine's smile was trembling but genuine. "We'd like that. Liam would love that." Raymond drove home as the sun set, turning the sky the same shades of pink and gold it had been the morning Noah died. But this time, instead of feeling like an ending, it felt like something else. Not a beginning, not healing, but maybe the first step toward learning how to carry the weight without being crushed by it. He still came home to an empty apartment, still sat at a table that felt too big for one person, still woke up some mornings and forgot, for just a moment, that his son was gone. But now he had something to hold on to, a purpose beyond just surviving. Every week he went back to the Ashford estate, taught Liam how to fix things, watched the boy grow stronger, watched Noah's heart beat steady and sure in a chest that was learning what it meant to be whole. It didn't erase the pain, didn't make losing Noah any less devastating, but it made the loss mean something, made the sacrifice count for something more than just grief. 6 months after the surgery, on a Sunday afternoon in late autumn, Raymond showed up at the estate to find Liam waiting by the door with his toolkit and a problem he couldn't solve. One of the swing set chains had rusted through and needed replacing. Raymond helped him remove the old chain and install the new one, showing him how to check for weak spots, how to prevent future rust. When they finished, Liam tested the swing, pumping his legs to gain height, laughing as he flew through the air. Katherine came out to watch, standing beside Raymond as they observed her son doing something that, 6 months ago, would have been impossible. She didn't say anything, didn't need to. They both understood what they were witnessing. A second chance, a future that almost wasn't. A child alive and thriving because another child had died. He asks about the donor sometimes, Katherine said quietly. I told him the truth, that a boy his age died, and that boy's father chose to save him instead of keeping his son's body whole. Liam wants to know his name, wants to know what he was like. Raymond was quiet for a long moment, watching Liam swing higher and higher. Noah, he finally said. His name was Noah. He liked pancakes and dinosaurs and fixing things with his dad. He wanted to help people. Even when he was sick, even when he could barely breathe, he wanted to make things better. Noah, Katherine repeated softly, trying the name out. Thank you for telling me, for letting us know him, even a little. The swing creaked rhythmically as Liam flew through the air, Noah's heart beating steady in his chest. Raymond watched and remembered his son at that age, full of questions and laughter despite the oxygen tank that followed him everywhere. He remembered Noah asking to learn plumbing, wanting to fix things like his dad. Remembered the pride on his boy's face when he successfully repaired his first leaky faucet. And standing there in the autumn sunlight, watching a child who should have died instead learn to fly on a swing powered by his son's heart, Raymond understood something he couldn't have grasped in those first raw weeks of grief. Noah hadn't died so Liam could live. Noah had died, full stop. That was the tragedy, the unfair, unbearable truth. But his death had created an opportunity for life. And Raymond's choice to honor the organ donor registry, to let Noah's body become a gift for strangers, had turned that death into something more than just loss. It had turned it into legacy. The days grew shorter. The seasons changed. Raymond kept coming back, kept teaching Liam to fix things, kept watching Noah's heart beat in a chest that grew stronger every week. It wasn't closure. There was no such thing when you lost a child. But it was something, a reason to keep going, a purpose beyond just surviving. And on the hardest days, when the empty apartment felt too silent and the grief too heavy, Raymond could close his eyes and hear Liam's laughter, could picture a boy swinging high with his son's heart, could remember that Noah's last gift to the world was still out there beating, still saving a life, still making broken things whole. And maybe in the end that was the only thing that made the unbearable just barely bearable. Not the comfort of knowing his son was a hero, not the gratitude of a billionaire whose child was saved, but the simple, terrible, beautiful truth that love doesn't end when the heart stops. It just finds new ways to beat. Tantu